Hello and welcome to Book Reviews Kill, a podcast about fantasy, sci-fi, and horror novels. I'm Evan.
And I'm Chad.
And today you're joining us for our recap and discussion of Wizard and Glass, Book 4 in the Dark Tower by Stephen King. Oh my god. Chad, what did you think about this one?
I loved it. I loved it. I think I loved it as much as the last one.
I think I liked it a little bit more. This is my second time reading it. And
oh, really? Because you liked it less.
Yeah, I forgot just how heart-wrenching this book is.
It made me cry.
Yeah, same. Stephen King managed to fit an entire Western love story into this book. There's lost and hopeless love. There's gunfights. There's cowboys. There's witches. Mysterious magical orbs. There's terrifying swamps that eat people alive.
It's riddled with depth and meaning, too. Like, if you want to get deep with it, you can get deep with it. Also, I've come to the conclusion, more like the realization, that Stephen King doesn't like any sort of preamble to love. You're either in love or you're not in love. There's no, like, warm-up phase. You know, he's not a pre-game foreplay sort of guy. He's just like instant love. We're in love now.
See, okay, so here's the thing with that, because I think I know what you're talking about, and usually I agree that like instant love is kind of like I'm usually a little bit put off by it, but Stephen King did instant love between two teenagers. This is his Romeo and Juliet, right?
Well, like, he also did it with Eddie and Susanna, which is why I say that's like all I've known of his love stories are like.
That's true. That's very valid. That's super valid, actually. Yeah.
But you're right. Teenage love does have a propensity to be like an on-off switch for sure.
Well, I want to get into that a little bit more after we're done with the recap, because that's a big part of this book, obviously.
Oh yeah.
The quartet is pulled even tighter together by the end of this book. We get to see so much more of Roland. You know, in The Gunslinger, he was this mysterious, brooding, kind of off-putting character. And now we've had a ton of his backstory revealed to us, and we can't help but feel the same as the rest of his quartet. Like, I'm loyal to Roland now. I'm attached to him in spite of everything he's done wrong, in spite of everything that he blames himself for. I mean, like, do you feel the same way?
Oh, 100%. There's even a specific moment, which we'll mention later here, but there's a specific moment that I was like, and I forgive him for some of the things that I judged him for before, now that this has been put into perspective, and I understand where he's coming from, and he's a much more fleshed out, understandable character to me. Before, where he was kind of this just like cold operator willing to do anything for the sake of his goal, and it was like, kind of turned me off from like really committing to liking him. Now I get it.
He's humanized.
Yes, well put.
I wonder how this book was received when it first came out. I mean, imagine waiting 5 years after this absolute monster book that is The Wasteland.
I can't wait to have this story continue. Nope.
Yeah, you get that cliffhanger resolved at the beginning of this book, and that's great. But the main story like totally grinds to a complete halt. What, like 150 pages into a 900-page book? I can definitely see why people could be annoyed, but I mean, the story that it shifts to is so incredible. It doesn't bother me. But I am going to say, though, our plan was to read The Wind Through the Keyhole right after this, but I think we're going to have to go straight to The Wolves of the Kala, because I want you to get more of this. This is your first time through this. Wind Through the Keyhole is another like Roland backstory story.
Oh, okay. Filling in his past.
Right. So, and it's, I still haven't read it, but I'm sure it's really good, but we need to get a move on here. I want to get through Wolves of the Kala and then into
maybe
Song
let's
of
put
Susanna.
two books between us and another Roland backstory.
I think we should just finish all 7 books and then read Wind Through the Keyhole, because I looked at some testimonials on Reddit and people were like, the best way to do it is to read Wind Through the Keyhole after you finish the whole series, because it's like revisiting old friends. There's like tiny little things littered in through Wind Through the Keyhole they're not really spoilers, but they're kind of nods to what happens in the 7th book. So I think since it's your first time through, let's just read all 7 at a clip and then read Wind Through the Keyhole. We need to push through this story.
Okay.
You know, we're spending a lot of time with Roland's backstory.
That's
Roland's
true.
Backstory,
I want to get to the Expanse.
Yeah. And I mean, we're going to read Wind Through the Keyhole right after the 7th book. Like, we're not going to take a break or anything, but I think it's like 250 pages long.
Okay,
we'll
it's
just crush it. Yeah. But anyway, that's the intro. Let's get right to the recap and then start talking about this massive, amazing book.
Yeah, let's do it.
The book begins with Roland's quartet barreling through the wastelands, engaged in a riddle contest with the insane train, Blaine the Mono. Blaine answers Roland's Fair Day riddles and all of the riddles from Jake's book, Riddle-de-Dum, without pause. The group is resigned to their fate when Eddie finally stumps Blaine, using jokes that Roland had previously declared unworthy and foolish. Blaine's mechanical brain is fried from the effort involved in answering Eddie's riddles. He continues down the tracks, but slows down enough for the group to survive the final impact Blaine had planned to use to kill them all. The group wanders into the city of Topeka and realizes that a plague called Captain Trips has ravaged the world. Eddie finds a new wheelchair for Susanna, and they discover that this Topeka is subtly different from their own. There is a baseball team called the Kansas City Monarchs, a car named the Takuro Spirit, and a soda brand, Nozala. Realizing they have left the path of the beam, their only choice is to continue in the same direction that Blaine was heading, along I-70. There is a thinny along the road that reminds Roland of the one he encountered before in the barony of Megis. On their way to a mysterious building in the distance, the quartet rests along the side of the road, and Roland tells them his story. Roland's tale of his youth is of his lost love, Susan Delgado, and his first quartet. Roland is sent east from Gilead with his friends Cuthbert and Elaine after his early test of manhood. He was sent away in order to prevent him from being killed by Martin Broadcloak. The three boys travel to the town of Hambry in the barony of Megis and use the names Will Dearborn, Arthur Heath, and Richard Stockworth. There, Roland meets Susan Delgado, who is being essentially sold to Thorin, the mayor of Hambry, as something the locals called a gilly. The group is tasked to count goods of all kinds that the affiliation may need in the fight against a rebel leader named John Farson, the Good Man. They quickly realize that all is not as it seems. The presence of mercenaries known as the Big Coffin Hunters is strange for such a small town, and there are far more horses than they have been told to expect. Meanwhile, Roland and Susan's love grows. Susan breaks her promise to Mayor Thorin and her aunt, Cordelia Delgado, to remain a virgin until she goes to his bed as his Jilly. They sleep together, and Rhea of the Coos nearly ruins all with her hypnotic suggestion to Susan. She had told Susan to cut off all her hair after she loses her virginity, but Roland was able to prevent her from doing so. Rhea does eventually discover their affair and sets out to get her revenge upon Susan. Mayor Thorin is murdered by Roy DePape, one of the coffin hunters, who leaves Cuthbert's bird skull, known as the Lookout, at the scene. Roland and his quartet are arrested and taken to jail for killing Thorin, but they manage to escape with the help of Susan. The quartet sets out for battle against Farson's men. Roland tells Susan to hide with Shimi in a hut in the bad grass and wait for his return. If he does not return, she is to take his guns to his father and tell him what happened. Roland's plan has two stages: ambush the convoy led by the Big Coffin Hunters to take the Pink Bend and lead Latigo into a trap in Eyebolt Canyon. Roland and his quartet spot the convoy heading towards Sitgo's oil derricks, and they fall in behind them. Cuthbert silently picks off several men with his slingshot. Once one of the riders notice the attack, Roland and Elaine start picking off the rest. DePape is killed in the battle, and Roland personally kills Eldred Jonas, the failed gunslinger, and recovers the glass ball. After that, they head toward Latigo's encampment. Elaine uses the machine gun he got from Fran Lengyel to kill many of the men and light the tankers on fire. Then, they break off their attack and head towards Eyebolt Canyon. Roland successfully lures Latigo and his men into the canyon and lights the brush in front of the entrance to trap them in. Cuthbert and Elaine are almost caught in the thinny before Roland snaps them out of it. The quartet escapes by climbing out, leaving Farson's men to die. While waiting for Roland, Susan is discovered by the Big Coffin Hunters and taken back to town by Clay Reynolds. Susan is held prisoner at Mayor Thorin's house, but freed by Olive Thorin, his sister. Her attempt to escape is futile, though, as she is captured once more by Rhea, who had previously seen her escape in the glass. She is then taken through town and burned as a Reap Day sacrifice in a public display. Roland sees all this in the wizard's glass and is devastated, blaming himself for Susan's death. He does not say a word until Cuthbert and Elaine bring him back to Gilead. It is morning when Roland concludes his story. The quartet continues down I-70 and reaches the Emerald City, a city remarkably similar to the one from The Wizard of Oz. It is here that they encounter Andrew Quick, the TikTok man, posing as Oz, and Randall Flagg, who departs as Roland tries to kill him with Jake's Ruger. Flagg leaves Merlin's grapefruit in his place. Roland takes his quartet into the glass to show them the story of what happened when he returned to Gilead. He looked into the pink glass before he returned it to his father, Stephen, and discovered a plot in which his mother, Gabrielle, kills his father. He goes to her to give her the choice of exile or repentance. It is unknown which one she would have chosen because Roland was tricked by the glass into believing that she was Rhea and accidentally killed her. She was carrying a belt that she had made for Roland, presumably as a peace offering. When the quartet leaves the glass, they find themselves miles past the Emerald City. They reassure Roland of their commitment to his quest and continue on toward the land of Thunderclap, ever striding toward the Dark Tower. My goodness.
My goodness, indeed. Okay, I'm going to start with what the hell sort of plague is called Captain Trips?
Ha! I'm so happy that I know about this.
Whoa, there's an answer?
Oh, yeah, that's the plague from The Stand.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what they call it in The Stand. It's
Why is it called Captain Trips?
I can't remember. I read The Stand a while ago. No, it's like I think it's the one of the people in the military that had first let it out or discovered it or something like that. I can't remember
it was named after a person. That makes sense.
Yeah, The Stand begins with a person that works for the military in this like complex, like rounding up his family because he's like, oh my God, we let this freaking virus out. We got to go. You know, that's like how the book starts. It's really, you should read The Stand. Oh my God, that book is
Stand. Amazing. Okay, it's going in my.
It's like anyway, but we're not talking about The Stand. Well, we can kind of because like a lot of Stephen King books are linked together, you know?
That's what you keep telling me. Give me the 20-second while I type it into my phone here.
Well, I mean, it's just like the Captain Trips. I'm not totally sure if the Topeka in Wizard and Glass is the Topeka in The Stand, or if Captain Trips is something, because like Jake kind of mentions it could come into our world, right? And Roland's like, yeah, I mean, it probably could. So in my mind, The Stand takes place in our world, but Captain Trips had kind of like migrated through because the Dark Tower was breaking down. So that's kind of like how I see it. But The Stand could be. And then there's that other reference where they're walking through Topeka and they see like a note on a windshield of a car that says you need to go to Nebraska, and then like the dark man is in the west or something like that. Do you remember that little tiny snippet? It's only for people that have read The Stand. It's really obscure.
There are a few things like that. I'm like, what is that sentence? Yeah, okay.
If you had read The Stand, it would make a lot more sense. But I mean, I loved it because I'm a fan, you know, but you don't need to know it or anything. But
sure.
It's just a reference to The Stand.
Well, and I really like books that have a little bit more depth for those who are wanting to kind of sink their teeth into the universe and the story and the setting. It's nice to have depth there should you want it. I don't like required depth where it's like it forces you to be like, I really have to nerd out hard on this in order to even kind of understand and keep up with it. I just like having the option to. And Stephen King, it sounds like, does an extremely good job of like lacing in those little Easter eggs that, like, if you should want to become a huge Stephen King nerd and unearth all of my little connections here, you can, you know? So I really like when there being gold to find should I want to get out the shovel.
Totally. Yeah. And there's gold in there. But like you said, you don't need to know every single thing to really enjoy this book, you know?
Right.
Captain Trips is it's just a cool thing. I mean, it's actually not that cool. It kills like 98% of the people on the planet, but it's a pretty cool nod to Captain Trips for sure.
Another very cool nod that I super loved was the wizard being called Flag. He's like, no, my name is Flag. And I was like, oh,
you know what that is?
The dragon.
Yeah. And also The Stand. Yeah.
Oh, and also the flag is in The Stand?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. He's all over the place.
Dude.
Because I don't think that Flag dies at the end of the Eyes of the Dragon, does he? He's just driven away.
Yeah, he's just cast out. I think that's the end of Eyes of the Dragon. I haven't read that in a little while.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. It's how skilled is Stephen King to be able to write with such different voices? Like, the Eyes of the Dragon is a very differently written book. Like if you were to give me both of those books, or like three books, and I'd be like, which two of these books were written by the same person, I would not pick those two.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, if you read something like 11/22/63, it reads way different than The Dark Tower. It's first person. It's a whole different set of events. The main character is not like Roland or Eddie or Jake or anybody. He's his own guy, you know? So he is, yeah, very versatile. I have some questions for you, though, because this is your first time through. My initial question is, did you notice similarities between Roland's quartets? He's got two quartets.
Sure. The one with Cuthbert and Elaine and Susan
and
then
Shimi.
And Shimi. Yeah, and Shimi is the Oi.
Yeah, Shimi is kind of like Oi in that he's like way more than he appears to be, you know?
Right.
He's extremely helpful, but everybody kind of underestimates him, just like people
very
underestimate.
Loyal.
Yeah, people underestimate Billy Bumblers, people underestimate Shimi. I would say, this is just my thing, you can tell me if you agree with this or not, but I would say that Eddie and Cuthbert are similar. Eddie is kind of like Roland's new Cuthbert.
And
Susanna
Roland says that many times throughout the books.
Right, yeah, even in Drawing of the Three,
references.
Yeah. And then Elaine is Susanna is Roland's new Elaine. You know, a little more level-headed, cooler. Is the kind of the cool head in the gang. You know, that's kind of Susanna's role. I would say that Jake is a stand-in for Susan. Roland loves Jake. Like Roland, Jake is Roland's new sacrifice. Like Roland's new. It's the biggest obstacle between him and the tower, I would say.
And he even let both of them die. Well, at least in his own mind.
That's another thing I wanted to ask you about. Is like, okay, so Roland absolutely lets Jake die. He literally lets go of him, and
it's like
Roland kills Jake. He doesn't let him die. He kills
little
him.
lion hanging on the cliff, and he's like, to fall into the stampede.
But with Susan, like, do you think that that's Roland's fault?
No,
Yeah,
I don't
either. Yeah,
no, it happened, but I don't see a way that he could have been successful, gotten everyone out that he did, and still made it without like knowing the future or anything, you know. So no, I don't think that was his fault.
And he still had a mission to accomplish too.
So right, and in fact, it had just become a much larger mission because he had just gotten taken on that little trip by the golden wizard glass or the ruby red wizard glass.
That kind of leads into my next question, though. It's like, are you on Cuthbert's side? Because Cuthbert is pretty upset with Roland, obviously. He's saying, you know, you have made a virtue of irresponsibility or something like that. I can't remember exactly what the phrase was, but, you know, Cuthbert is extremely upset with Roland. And I wanted to ask you, this is kind of a nuanced question, I guess, but do you think that Cuthbert would have felt the same way if he wasn't just a little bit jealous about the entire situation, too?
You know, yes. I mean, I was
frustrated with Roland.
Oh, for sure. I was like, you're like disrespecting your friends. They look up to you as the leader. You're the gunslinger here. And right now you're the gunslinger in skill only, not in like the morality and like the stand-up stalwart, no budge leader that you need to be. It's like, no, you've allowed yourself to kind of get led off and fall into the passion of love, which is great, but you need to control it. You have much greater responsibilities here beyond just falling in love. And, you know, if their mission hadn't have turned out to be anything more, they wouldn't have unearthed this plot, then yeah, okay, whatever, do whatever you want, man. But like, it wasn't, and they were well aware of this plot brewing, and he needed to be way more on his game. So if anything could be led to, you know, Susan's demise and it being his fault, I think a little bit more like working with his team, being more upfront, being like less of I have a plan and then going off to shag behind the woodshed, you know, like how about you tell them what the plan is, talk about it with the group. I really hate it when people in stories and just in real life are like, don't worry about it, like I have a plan. It's like, well, maybe
communicate that with us, maybe.
Yeah, maybe I have something inside of my brain that might be able to help your plan, or vice versa. Like, I don't know. It just seems arrogant and disrespectful.
Right, but I mean, should Roland really be being held to the standard of a... I mean, because he is technically a gunslinger, but he did it way too early also.
Yeah.
And, like, Roland's 14. Like, that is a baby. That is a child.
He's a tiny child.
Yeah, he is a child. And so, I mean, I think I can sympathize with Cuthbert, but holding Roland to that standard as well, especially because like Cuthbert and Elaine both have never been in this kind of love before.
Right.
And so I think that it's It's just kind of rich of Cuthbert to be like, you have to act perfectly right now when he doesn't understand at all what it's like to feel the way that Roland feels. Now,
Right.
to
Especially
kind of
14-year-old love. You remember those
right.
feelings?
Oh yeah, I
Man.
remember that. Like, yeah,
Whew.
it's rough. It
So yeah, like
sucks.
while
Yeah.
I hate on him and take Cuthbert's side, I am certainly like understanding and forgiving of the fact that like he's a 14-year
Right.
old.
Yeah. This he is a baby, and
He's a baby,
they're all
yeah.
babies. Babbies.
They're babies. I mean, even his dad is like, I'm sending you away when most boys still like cry or without their mother or something like that. You know, it's like they remind you, which I really like actually, because lots of times I forget that these kids in stories are 10 years old going through this just because the situations that they're put in and then the way they're responding to it, and they're being written by someone much older, so they kind of have just get given this sense of being much older, and I often forget, and then like halfway through the book I'm reminded, and it kind of like messes me up a little bit. But Stephen King like keeps reminding me like, hey, remember he's a kid, remember he's a kid. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, cool, thanks,
Yeah. Speaking of them being kids, did you read the afterword for this that
yeah,
Stephen
uh-huh.
King wrote? You know, it's funny. In that afterword, he says like he couldn't remember at this late age of 45 or whatever what it feels like to be so young and so in love. But I thought he did a phenomenal job at it. I mean, Roland and
Oh,
Susan are
phenomenal.
they're so stupid sometimes. They're
They're idiots.
yeah, and you know they're just they're going to get caught. And they kind of know it too, and I think that's probably adding to
Totally.
how exciting it is for them too. It's not explicitly said, but we all know, right?
Oh yeah.
Roland is completely blinded by these feelings, but he's never had these feelings before. I mean, you do such absolutely idiotic things when this is happening to you for the first time, and King really captured that. It's just so much more sad considering the situation that they were in. Kind of like you said. I mean, in most other scenarios, this whole affair that they're having would have been much more innocent, but
Oh
they were
yeah.
doomed from the start. There's too many other things going on that are just, it's so sad.
It's so
It's
sad. And what's funny with that sort of love is it's like you're kind of dumb on purpose. Like you're not put out of your head like I just wasn't thinking. Like that's what we say, but truly you were. You knew it. You just like didn't allow yourself to think about it because you knew it so much that you were in the wrong. You shouldn't be doing that, or you're being a complete nitwit. You just like kind of choose to be dumb on purpose because the other side of that coin is so shiny.
Well, I mean, when you're that young and in love for the first time and you're getting those feelings for the first time, not only are you very new to those feelings, but you're also new to the potential consequences of those feelings. So, like,
That's
as you get older, you start to realize, like, oh, hey, maybe reel it back just a little bit, Evan. Like, you know, like, yes, you really like this person and that's great, but maybe you shouldn't just dive all the way in because remember what happened last time? It was like
right.
super traumatic and terrible. And you ended up in a relationship you probably shouldn't have been in. And, you know, it's like now after a while you start getting that experience and start understanding the actual real world consequences. You know, I didn't have a team of cowboy mercenaries on my ass about it, and I didn't have an entire town that was going to burn the love of my life at
Or
the
a
stake.
highly trained operator.
Right. But there are still consequences to your actions, and at the ripe age of fucking 14 that you are not
Man.
thinking about those and it's like that's one of the things too is that Roland and Susan seem to kind of on a superficial level kind of understand that what they were doing was going to lead to something bad. It's said a couple times that they know that if they get caught, it's going to end really badly for them.
Right, that whole love me then just love me is kind of
Yeah, if you love
the
me, then love
phrase
me.
that wraps up like damn the consequences
I
with
mean,
this
I love that
Titanic
line.
style hookup. This cannot end well. We both know it.
But they didn't know how badly it was going to end, though. Like, Roland didn't
Yeah.
think that
Boy.
Susan was going to be burned like a witch at the stake in front of the entire town.
I didn't think she was gonna I until she was Ash, I was sure she would be rescued.
In that same vein that you're talking about, did you notice how King kept telling us, though, all the, like, how this was going to end badly? Like, I don't know if you noticed that, but he does that in his
Mm-hmm.
books a lot,
A
actually.
lot. That's funny. I'm glad you mentioned that because I was reading it this morning and my computer was in a different room, but I remember wanting to take the note of that exact thing. Of I like how he'll like mention some line and later he would regret this. He'll say those little lines. You're like, oh, juicy. It kind of
Yeah.
pulls you in. Like I'm gonna pay extra attention.
Well, and it kind of breaks a lot of rules of storytelling, right? You shouldn't give away the farm like immediately, but he does it all the time. And it builds up a certain flavor of tension, right? It's like now you're kind of in on it and you're like, how is this? Wait, what? There's no way. There's no way. Like, oh, but he did say it.
He does it just enough that it allows the reader to feel superior, which we all love, but at the same time, it doesn't ruin the story by giving us too much advanced notice, you know?
Yeah, there's a line right before Susan is burned at the stake. I'm just gonna keep saying that, where he says they didn't know this was the last time that they would embrace. You know, and you're just stuck there. You don't believe it. You're like, there's no
No.
possible way that they're gonna do this to her. They're not gonna.
I was like, well,
burn her alive.
they'll just be separated or something. Like their tails will just go off in different directions. That made me cry.
Oh yeah.
I just stopped. I called a buddy who's just like always really one of those positive people, and just like I was just like, I need to talk to someone who's having a good day
Oh
right
my
now.
God. It's
It kind of messed
brutal.
me up, dude. I
It's
was just
really
like,
hard to read. It's super
well,
hard to read.
Stephen King, just to like make sure really stick it in there hard right before like minutes before Roland learns via magical acid trip orb that she's pregnant. Man, like he had to teach him that one too. So it was like full blow, not just like a bat on the head, but like two bats. Bam, bam, bam. Just
Yeah, and it's like this
rough.
mob mentality. That's the worst part of, not the worst part, but that's one of the really terrible parts about all of it, is that this is a town that Susan has grown up in her entire life. She knows all of
Right.
these people intimately, and on a dime, they all decide that it's okay to
Yeah.
burn her alive. For what? For what? For
From
like,
the most croniest old person, the one person most likely to lie that no one would
yeah.
even have inside their home because of they don't want to be associated with her off of her word. And it even says right before she gets thrown in the fire, and the townsfolk kind of had this moment of realization, like we're about to burn someone that we've grown up with, and it's like if they would have waited one more second, they probably would have pulled her out, but it was too late, you know, and it was just
Yeah,
like, oh
man. It kind of reminded me of I wonder if he had this in mind, but like Shirley Jackson's like The Lottery. Did you read that in school?
no,
Have you heard of it?
no, I haven't.
It's like a really famous. I think it's like a short story. I don't know if it's a novella. It's a short story by Shirley Jackson. This town once a year has a lottery, and whoever gets picked is stoned to death. And it's this ritual that they have, and it kind of
What?
reminded me of that. Yeah, where it's just this normal, pretty normal town. I mean, for most of this book, everybody's there's a bar, people get drunk, people hang out. There's a lot of the same makings of a pretty normal town, and everyone's like fairly nice to each other, and then this happens.
Just is it one time a year?
Yeah, I think in the lottery it's once a year. But
Oh,
I don't know
why?
if Hambry has ever burned anybody alive, but
What's the purpose in the book as to why they do that?
in the lottery,
Yeah, in the lottery.
I'm not sure. I can't remember.
Hmm.
I read it in high school. We talked about it a lot, but I was probably not paying attention. Should probably
Yeah.
read it again, But I just remember the way that it made me feel. It was like this feeling of I was like indignant. I couldn't believe this was actually happening. Yeah, I couldn't believe that this town had got together and did something so barbaric and so terrible, like for nothing.
Right.
I mean, if you really look at what this situation actually is, all this girl did was sleep with somebody as a teenager. That's it.
Allegedly.
Right. They didn't even have any proof of it. But even if they did, it's still not a transgression. As the reader, at least, I'm sitting here like, she did nothing. The fact that this town expects her to sleep with like this 60-year-old man who's already married and just like
Yeah.
be bought and paid for, basically, like cattle, like that's already bad enough. And then to burn her alive because she didn't go through with it.
Well, I mean, I think they blamed her for murdering a couple people as well. The old lady did. Two townsfolk, I think.
Did they actually blame her for the actual murder, or did they?
I think it was, yeah.
I thought they blamed Roland for it. Did they end up blaming her for it? Is that what
Well,
it
no,
was?
they blamed Roland and crew for
Thorin.
the mayor's murder, but there was someone else that got murdered.
She actually
that they
did
blamed her
murder
for.
it was the chief of police or the
She did, yeah.
the sheriff or whatever. Yeah, she actually
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, she
Okay.
did
Actually,
murder
now that
that,
you
yeah.
mention it, it's not for.
Yeah.
But they still shouldn't have burned her. But now that I'm
Totally,
thinking
totally.
about it,
And
it's
the
like,
mayor was.
oh yeah,
and
she did kill that guy.
I mean, which was a great scene, man.
Yeah, that was a really good scene.
Oh
for
gosh,
sure.
and I loved how like she like missed first off. Like Stephen King has this really, really clever and like interesting way of and kind of realistic in my mind of having his climactic scenes like that have amazingly lucky, awesome circumstances that are very fortunate, like most stories, but also interwoven with those are things that are amazingly unlucky. And it's kind of real life-ish, because in real life, you always make these plans, and it's like, what's the old quote, like, men plan and God laughs, and it's like that kind of happens. We always make plans and they're never the way we think they're going to be. That whole night of climax after climax after climax, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of really awesome lucky plans that work out great. There's also a lot of really unlucky things that happen, like them getting jumped right out of the gate.
What did you think about that scene kind of early on in Roland's story where they're in the bar in the Traveler's Rest? They kind of like get the jump on the coffin hunters. It's like the initial
when he's about to
kind
make shimmy, lick the floor.
Yeah,
with
totally.
God, or clean his boots with his tongue. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It was awesome. It was radical. We needed a scene to show us like these kids aren't just like hot shit striding around. Like, they're actually the real thing. They've got it. That one, and then it shows you into the mind of the other guys, where he's like, and I've decided that I think that he's gonna die too.
Yeah. Did you listen to this on audiobook?
A lot of it, yeah.
Yeah, me too. Frank Muller. I want to take a little bit of a sidetrack here to talk about Frank Muller for a second, because he deserves to be talked about. If any of you are listening, you've never heard him narrate an audiobook, he is my number one favorite audiobook narrator. I think he's one of the best that's ever been. Unfortunately, he died in 2008 after getting into a motorcycle accident, which is really, really sad.
Oh, man. What a loss.
Yeah, the Wolves of the Kala, the next book in this series, is dedicated to Frank Muller.
So who does some of the books come after that, or does he do all of them?
Yeah, George Goodell does the next ones. George Goodell actually did The Gunslinger as well, I think. But I can't remember.
Sad.
Yeah, I know, because George Goodell does a good job, but yeah, Frank Muller is. He also does The Talisman, which is another really excellent Stephen King book. His raspy voice, like, and then Roland went outside, and then
you have forgotten the face of your father. Like, he just has this commanding, and he's like, that's the voice of a king. You're like, that was the voice of a king, Frank.
Roland's guns crashed, like the way it's just like, damn.
And his little slimy men who are all on a western, they're kind of gross.
Oh yeah, what you think about the way that they talk in like in the barony? So it does.
Yeah,
you can.
And the
bastards.
voice, you bastards. I read in his voice now.
Yeah,
like
me
his,
too.
His, like, he did such a good job and that's rare. Typically, I'm a little arrogant in my own brain, like, nah, my brain's better at coming up with that way their voices sound. Nope.
Yeah, Frank Muller's the man. He's the man. He's the best.
His little oif sounds are great too.
Jake. Cool. Yeah, it must have been difficult and fun, obviously, but Stephen King basically had to create an entire vernacular here, like an entire accent almost, in the way that these people talk.
What does he call it? Crunk?
I can't remember what
it's called. Crunk.
I think that's a whole other language. That's like I can't remember. That was like really briefly mentioned.
Yeah,
I know what you're talking
mayor's
about.
wife.
King had to basically go in and say, okay, how does this entire region of people talk? They say like ye and yar, and then there's the high speech too, which Susan employs on Cordelia now and then gets reprimanded for it. And the high speech seems to be speech that doesn't have any of those kinds of like ye's and yars and so it does and all that stuff.
Right. But it's not so old Englishy that it's like super like eloquent like that, but it's a little bit more.
It's like more commanding and proper.
Yeah, and direct.
Like only adults talking about really serious things would talk like that, or
right.
And then there's also seems to be like a sort of kind of rural disdain for the kind of like upper echelon communities like Gilead, like these other baronies that seem to be doing a little bit better than Magus, so it's been kind of forgotten about and left to the wayside. And even when the quartet gets to the barony and into Hambry, their welcome party is very kind of like, we are on top of it. Like, look at all this cool stuff we have. Like, you're totally welcome here. We have the best hospitality. Like they're trying to show off to these kids from this area. Only one of them is ostensibly from Gilead, but they're from baronies that are much more well-to-do than Magus is. You can really feel a lot of that disdain towards them. Even though they're kind of like well-liked, it's so easy for the town to turn on the Roland's quartet because they're not from there. They're the outsiders, so they are, and
everyone's so mad because they're not going to get a nice little bonfire and dancing on reaping day. So we got to take out our energy on a young woman we've grown up with by burning her to death.
One of King's strengths, and if you read a lot of his other books, you'll notice this. He does a really good job at setting up an entire town. He does the work in so many of his books. There's like 100 different characters, and they've all got backstories to some degree or another. And he's building up the way that this town operates, what they like, what they don't like, the things that they approve of, their culture. He goes really deep into all of this because he unleashes it all later in something like what they did to Susan, or how they react to the news that the mayor died at the hands of these outsiders. I do have another notice here that I thought was kind of funny, but it's also obviously it's horrible. But it wasn't enough that we got this entire story of the devastating loss that Roland suffered through by watching his first love literally burned alive. But King had to put the cherry on top of this terrible, bloody Sunday at the very, very end, and let us all know that Roland murders his own mother. So it's not enough.
Man.
Oh my God. I
Poor
would have totally.
Roland.
I know. The more that we find out about it, and we still haven't heard about Cuthbert and Elaine.
Yeah, that's true. Because obviously they get the major shaft at some point, and Roland also blames himself for.
It's amazing that he's even able to have these kinds of connections at all at this point.
Yeah, being so afraid of like the people that he gets close to coming to devastatingly terrible
Why
ends.
wouldn't he think that though? I mean, it makes a lot. Like, look at his track record. I mean,
Totally.
like every single person he's ever enjoyed being around, even remotely, has been killed, and it's usually somewhat his fault, or at least he believes it is.
Yeah, I hope that it's his fault. I hope that Cuthbert and Elaine are his fault, like he thinks that Susan was his fault, because it really wasn't, in my opinion. Like, yes, he was being a fool, but so was she, and so were they, and everyone was, and I don't blame him for that. I don't blame him for his mother either. So I hope it's a similar sort of thing and not just like a straight like, oh man, Jake situation, Jake 2.0.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame Roland for his mom either. I mean, that he thought it was Rhea, right? I mean,
Right.
even Rhea comes up in the ball and is just like, you killed my poor Irma, you killed my snake. And it's like, dude, it's just a snake. Like, geez. Oh, did you catch that part where she puts the snake in her lap? And it's just like, nobody could quite do it like Irma did.
Dude, yes, I did. Okay, so am I to believe that she was having sexual relationships with both of her cat and her snake?
I don't know if it was the cat.
She mentions the cat like licking or something at one point, and I was like, oh, like,
yeah. I mean, Rhea the Coos is disgusting, absolutely vile,
foul character,
really, really bad. From the Beneath the Kissing Moon chapter, the very first chapter of Roland's story, as soon as you get into Rhea's hut, you're just like, this is disgusting. Whatever this is, I'm not on board with this witch. This is awful. Yeah.
She like would actually make me retch. Just the way that she's explained, like, oh God,
Gross.
She was just disgusting. She was a disgusting thing. Are we ever going to get a greater explanation of the thinny? Because like that was, I mean, I can't really describe what it is. Like, it's just like a green mist. It's like kind of sentient, maybe, gets in your brain and tricks you and eats you. Or
so my understanding of what a thinny is, and we're sticking our toes into when stuff is going to start getting really weird here. Wolves of the Kala is kind of the introduction to the main meat of this story, and it just gets bonkers. It is BANANAS. It is bananas going on from here. But the Thinny, to my understanding, is a place where reality has kind of is like waxing and waning. You know what I mean? It's a thinny. It's a thin wall between different dimensions and realities and stuff. So
obviously, okay, it's a place where the world is okay.
Yeah, it's a thinny. So it's like
right. I never put those two together.
Did you listen? Do you know what a musical saw sounds like? Have you ever listened to one before?
No.
It's really weird. I wish that I could play a maybe on the YouTube video or something.
Is it a terrible like?
You would recognize it like as soon as you saw it, but it sounds like it's a very off-putting sound.
And, and that's what you imagine it sounds like.
And that's what it does sound like. They've said it. It's like when Jake remembers like the guy playing the saw in the park.
Sure,
or whatever.
right. Okay, yeah.
That's what that sounds like, and it kind of oscillates between being almost like not audible at all to being so it's pervasive. It's making people crazy, and it just kind of goes back and forth. They're able to like clog up the sound by like putting a bunch of brush in the canyon
They
or
put
whatever.
bullets in their ears. Well, when they're
Yeah,
walking through the town, yeah, which
that
I
was
thought
pretty
was
cool.
cool. What do you think char you tree means? Like, obviously, it's like the simple farmer's greeting for the reaping day, but like, I think there's more to it than that, and I didn't pause to put too much more thought into it. Have you?
I don't know. I always kind of like. So this is the second time I've read this. The first time was a while ago.
To anyone listening, it's what everyone is like
Chanting
ranting and chanting
basically.
when
Yeah.
they burn Susan, like char you tree, char you tree.
I think that in the Reaping Festival they end up burning a scarecrow, and I think that that scarecrow had been named Charlie at
A
some point.
Steffi.
A Steffi, yeah, one of the
Yeah.
Steffies. I think
One
that
of the
that's
Steffies.
like the ritual or whatever.
Okay, kind of like a life for a life. Like this thing must be sacrificed so our crops can do
I don't
well,
even
sort
know
of
if it's
thing.
that deep or if they even know why they're doing it. You know, it's just like one of those things. But yeah, Charyu
Okay.
tree. I'm not really sure if there's like a really deep meaning to it or not. It's just a creepy
Okay.
word. It just sounds creepy.
It does sound really creepy.
Charyu tree. Charyu tree. Yeah, that's weird.
Do you think that the reason why Roland did not allow Cuthbert to light the fire when they're trapped in the box canyon, because Cuthbert was like, I've always had a thing for fire, let me do it, let me do it. He's like, no, this one's on me, man. Was because he knew the terrible consequences they were about to inflict upon these men, and he didn't want that to sit on Cuthbert's conscience, or was there any other reason, do you think?
I mean, yeah, that sounds about right for Roland. I mean, because he hasn't lost all of his sense, right? He hasn't lost all of his leadership abilities, and especially after like Cuthbert fucking socks him one, you know, which I thought
Yeah.
that was great. It needed to
Same. He
happen.
deserved that.
Even Roland at one point is just like, "Whoa, yeah, you're totally right. This is
Yeah.
getting a little wild in here. Like I'm just losing it. Oh
He
my god!"
apologized. He goes, I have forgotten the face of my father.
Cry your pardon. And even Cuthbert's like, "Okay, okay, fine, that's fine." But like, geez, come on, man, we got stuff to do. Roland is so dramatic, and he has been since he was a kid.
Yes.
Roland is super dramatic.
He
Like
takes
Roland,
himself very
and
seriously.
it works out for him sometimes.
Yeah.
It's totally fine, and that's how a gunslinger should be. But I feel like taking himself seriously to the point where he's almost distracted by his own self-loathing is forgetting the face of his father. You know, and he does
Absolutely.
it frequently too.
Frequently.
And it's not gunslinger behavior to get that down on yourself. There's no stoicism in that. There's no, you know, it's just he's being immature. He's
It's self
being
pity.
yeah, it's self-pity. I mean, and obviously like a little bit of self-pity is fine. A little bit goes a long way, but you know, to
Right.
wallow to the point of inaction. And he does it even in the main storyline too. He does it all the time.
Absolutely.
It's almost like annoying. It's like, dude,
Yeah.
come on, get it together, man. Like you're like 1,000 years old. Like
Right.
let's
You're
go.
going insane. Okay, fine. I like get it together, dude.
I don't think he's 1,000 years old, but
I don't
he's
yeah.
old.
I think it was pretty wise of Roland to light that fire for him though. Cause like, there's one thing, like, yeah, when they're coming up on those guys, they ambush like the 15 people and they take him out, and he looks over, Cuthbert's like grinning, and he's grinning back, and they're like whooping. It's like, yes, they're also like killing people, but that's the sort of like head-to-head fight that you can kind of
Yeah.
like glory in almost. But
Yeah,
like
they're
the
murdering
killing
people at that point.
yeah, but in the box canyon, oh, that was just burning them to death and forcing them into the thinny. And like Roland knew that even though if this works out perfectly, this will still be a disgusting victory. No one's gonna revel in the screams of dying men like that. Like ugh, that's just rough.
Yeah, and it's just so aligned with Roland's character that he wouldn't want one of his friends to be the one that was responsible for doing that. And it was Roland's plan
Mhm.
anyway. Like he who passes the sentence should swing the sword, as George
Yes.
R. Martin would say. Boom. Well, that's
Boom.
your
Threw
fantasy
that one in
podcast
there.
right there, folks.
There you go. um, they introduced the touch in this book, if I'm not mistaken, which I hadn't really heard of. Is that just like a kind of like a high metachlorian spidey sense sort of thing?
Yeah, that's how I look at it. Or it's the shine,
Okay.
which is what Stephen King kind of like Carrie has the shine, Danny from The Shining has the shine. It's like it's almost like
Okay.
yeah, it's like a fairly kind of like a distant cousin to precognition of some sort.
Yeah,
Or
like a
something
premonition, sort of sixth sense.
Yeah, and
Okay.
yeah, I like Elaine a lot, and I wish that he had been I wish that he had more lines. I mean, Cuthbert is really cool and really funny, but there are conversations between like Cuthbert and Elaine that I wish that Elaine had just had a little bit more agency and was able to, I don't know. He's just such a cool character, and I wanted to see more of him. That's probably one of the only things about this book that I felt like could have been longer. If anything, some of it could have been shorter.
I get it.
But
He got
that's totally
Lucianed.
cool. Yeah, yeah, that's a good way of putting
Yeah, he's
it.
like one of my favorite characters, and he just didn't get as much screen time as I wanted. I could have
Yeah,
done with a little less
Cuthbert.
Roland and Susan,
Yeah, there
and
was
a
a
little
lot of
more.
Roland and Susan, but that's the whole point of it, right?
I
I
know.
mean,
Okay, he does very good with his romance. He does his sex scenes make me really uncomfortable. I don't know why,
men are
but my
notoriously
butthole
bad.
clenched the whole way through anytime, even like
Like,
the good ones.
yeah,
I'm
no,
just like,
like,
oh, there's just something gross about him, kind of like,
yeah. Stephen King's not
I
great
don't
at it.
know.
I'm not trying to make like a big bold statement or anything like that, but
It just make
rarely do
me
I read a good
uncomfortable.
sex scene written by a man. I don't know what
Yeah,
it is. We just for some reason can't we can't verbalize
man,
it. We don't seem to be able to do it as well. I've read sex scenes written by women that are really
very
solid,
good.
really
Yeah,
good,
very solid.
and not even just like erotica or anything, but just like we just can't do it. I don't know what it is.
No,
It's
no.
weird. Yeah, and Stephen King is definitely
It's either like too
not
much or
great at
too
it.
little, too descriptive or not descriptive enough, or like in the wrong way. It's like,
I know. I think that
oh,
it's, at one point, like Cuthbert said something like was thinking to himself about like Roland with like cupping the globes of her breasts or something. It's like
yeah,
globes. Like what are
the
you?
globes. Like, oh, and the things that like some of the like the wenches, like the tavern wenches say, you're just
Totally.
like,
Yeah.
oh God,
Yeah. Like Stephen King is not great at that kind of stuff. Like I
man.
love him. He's my favorite author, but he really, really falls short in those kinds of things. That's why he doesn't write that kind of stuff. But as like a on the whole,
As a habit.
but he
Yeah.
does have sex scenes in a fair few of his books, and they're all bad. Like they're all really, really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just one of those. I mean, not every author is perfect, and it's just one of the things that he just doesn't excel at, and he never has, and I don't think he ever will. It's
No,
just,
no, he just,
yeah.
yeah, it's odd. Okay, let's talk about the beginning of this book and the riddle off because I
Oh
really
yeah, sure,
enjoyed
yeah.
that quite a bit. Um, okay, so first off, I just really, really loved the like awesome, lovely irony that is Eddie being chided by Roland at the beginning, who's like, "Stop none of your little jokes here. We're taking this serious and we are getting this done," like, and then Eddie's kind of like, okay, fine. He kind of gets like put down or like turned off. And then that very trait is the thing that ends up defeating Blame the Train in the end, right? Because these questions are so simple. It's like almost like annoys him to like put computing power energy into figuring out the answer because it's so beneath him that it ends up just like blowing up his brain, which is just like fantastic. And I loved that solution.
Yeah, that's really interesting because at first you're like, "There's no way this is gonna work," right? I mean, this
Right.
is stupid. It's a stupid joke. It's a stupid riddle. The first time I read this, I was like, "This is the most idiotic possible thing that they could ever do," because Blaine is just gonna speed up and go faster out of sheer spite. But it's a computer, right? At the end of the day, it is a computer, and Eddie was really clever to recognize that and to recognize that like the only way we're gonna win this game is to cheat. We can cheat so hard that it breaks this computer because this isn't a
Right.
person. I mean, it's artificial intelligence, but it's not a person. You can still, there's a workaround there.
I kept expecting the like, but what's in my pockets is to like make an appearance, but it never did.
There was a riddle from The Hobbit in here, which I think
Was
was
there?
in, yeah, I think it was like
Oh, was it the teeth?
yeah, I think it was
30
like the
red horses
30
on a white
30
hill.
white
They stomp,
horses
they
on a red
clomp.
hill.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was from The Hobbit. I don't, and that might have been from something before The Hobbit, obviously, but I
I
was
don't
just
know.
looking for it. But that's where I read it was
It'll
from The
forever
Hobbit.
be in the Hobbit in my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. The riddle contest, that's ripped. If not that one riddle, like the whole contest idea in general is ripped right out of The Hobbit.
Oh yeah. And countless other books that I'm sure ripped their riddle off right out of the Hobbit as well. I don't know if Tolkien was the first, but he is in my mind.
Stephen King has definitely told everybody multiple times how much he loves Lord of the Rings and Tolkien.
Oh, that's a purposefully done thing.
Not the riddle. He probably just wanted to do a riddle thing and wasn't
Right.
like that. That wasn't a nod to Tolkien, but the one riddle in it that is from The Hobbit was probably it was him. It was probably his way of saying like I know what I'm doing. I know. I'm sorry.
Right.
Like,
Little nod off. Yeah.
but like
The
the
Palantir.
the glass is a mixture of like the Palantir and the ring. Rhea is going crazy because of it, and she doesn't want anyone else to have it. And even Eldred Jonas, I think it's Eldred Jonas, when he gets it initially, he's just like, "Oh man, now I don't even want to give this away." And he had it for like a second,
Right. There's a sense
So
of possessiveness that people
yeah,
have. Like, it's mine,
totally, it's my precious.
Yep.
So it is.
So it is. So it is. My precious. I know it's not mine, but I even find myself saying in my brain, my own.
My own.
God, I love his voices
I
so
know.
much. I'm already mad at whoever's going to be reading. I don't remember the name that you mentioned, but who's ever reading the next book.
George
I know
Goodell is
it's,
good. He does a good job.
I
It's just not.
know,
It's just
but
not
like,
Frank Muller. Yeah, I know.
I'm just going to be
I'm
like,
so
you are,
sorry.
you imposter.
It's not him. Yeah.
Instantly. There's a moment where, right at the beginning of Susan and Roland's love story, that she's kind of troubled over what to do, and she decides to let Ka do as it may and not meet up with Roland. He sneaks via Shimi a note, and it says to meet up, and she's like, I'm not going to meet up. I'm just going to let Ka do its thing. And she's like, I'm going to decide to honor my promise. And like, I don't know. I kind of feel like she's confusing Ka with what will be, which in my opinion is a conflation of what should be. And like what like that misunderstanding is in itself stroking the cat of Ka the wrong direction. In her attempt to be wise, she was being like a fool. Because really, you like fate will not be fulfilled by your inaction. Like you can't be like, oh, what will be, and then do nothing. It's
I think
like,
she.
no,
Oh, sorry to interrupt you. I mean, but
no, you're
I
good.
think she acknowledges that idea, though. She's thinking about something that her dad, Pat Delgado, had said, where
Yeah, exactly.
like to not choose is like the something of fools or something like that, or like not choosing is a choice as well, but it'll always end up bad or something like that. Was the advice that her dad had given her, or something
Okay.
like that.
Okay. Yeah, I
Um,
didn't catch when she like chose to, but at the time I was like annoyed with her. I was like, no, like Ka is like the road. Like it's not what will be definitely. Like it's just what should be. Like you can choose to leave it, but you're probably gonna get lost if you do. You aren't
yeah,
forced
but how
along
are you
its path,
supposed to
but
know like what is and what isn't Ka?
that's
You
true. But like
know,
doing nothing is like not gonna get you to Ka. I think, I don't know. I was just annoyed with
what
her.
if Ka is in action though? You know,
Maybe at
I don't
certain
know.
points
Yeah,
there was I literally
Ka's a
stood up and I
wheel.
was like, you have forgotten the face of your father.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Susan is 16, and you know, I mean, I think that she's a really great character, and it makes a lot of sense actually. Her and Roland being together, especially the the kind of sequence leading up to her being burned alive. And I'm going to keep saying burned alive because that's what happens, and I need to respect the
Dude.
way that Susan went out. Um, but yeah, before that happens, she even says to herself, like, I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to give them the satisfaction of hearing me. And it's like that. There's Roland's girl. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
this is
That's the girl of a gunslinger right there.
yeah, right, exactly. Man, she's so badass, and
She is
she's really
so
clever.
badass.
I mean, as much as her and Roland understand that this is probably going to end pretty badly, she's following her heart, and maybe her heart is Ka. I mean,
Right.
it comes to an apex at one point where she says, "If you love me, then love me." That's Susan saying that. You know what I mean? That's not
Right.
Roland cajoling her into it. He's not like, come on, it's my birthday, or like whatever. You know what I
Right.
mean?
If
Like it's
anything, he's very respectful of
right.
boundaries.
But she crosses that boundary and says, "If you love me, then love me."
Mm-hmm.
And that line is so important to everything that's going on here. She's essentially saying, like, we can dance around this as much as we want, right? But if you don't act on this and we don't, act on our urges and actually embrace what the feelings that are between us, I'm going to end up marrying this guy. Like, I'm going to end up being Thorin's Jilly, and then this isn't going to work between us. Even Roland says, like, I won't have you with if you're with another man or whatever. Which, I mean, it's like I get it, but also like, come on, Roland. Like she's
Yeah.
like, nope, I want you untainted. It's like, that kind of sounds like what Thorin said too, you dick. Like, I mean,
Yeah. Come
like,
on.
like
Nah,
you have
man.
like no.
Nah.
It's like, oh yeah, I have I'm sympathetic to your situation, but I'm only doing this on like my terms, you know. And it's like, come on, Roland.
Right.
Like, but he's 14, so you know.
Right.
And he's like Roland is full of pride, you know.
Absolutely.
Like
And
Roland,
part of it's earned, but
most of it's not though.
most
You
of it's
know,
not.
they're
Yeah.
babies. They don't even have their guns yet. And I think that's like another big part of this whole like why the situation is so gross and dumb and like such a clusterfuck is
Right.
because you know they're not there to do what they end up doing. That's stressed over and over again. They're purely there so that Roland can be out of the way of Martin Broadcloak. Roland brought Cuthbert and Elaine to just be along for the ride,
Right.
essentially.
Against his father's wishes, he was like, "You can bring Elaine, but don't bring Cuthbert, the stupid one, or whatever."
I think it's great that he brought him anyway, though.
Oh,
That's so
straight
awesome.
up.
And they would
One
have been
thing
able to do it without Cuthbert. So
No,
you know,
not at all. He was
Cuthbert knocked-
pivotal.
and that's what Ka is. You know, like
Right.
that's Ka. At least I
Right.
think it is. I don't know.
I think so.
Yeah.
One thing I was kind of annoyed with was Susan keep going back to like, well, I can't break my promise. I did promise. I did promise. Like, okay, there's kind of a hierarchy of morality here going on, which you're not acknowledging at all. Like, isn't you fulfilling your promise? Like, I don't know what marriage vows look like in their world, but if they're anything like ours, isn't you fulfilling your promise forcing two other people to break their promises? Like, I feel like that's a pretty, like, not to mention what you want and like your insides, what your heart is telling you about this whole situation. But like, she seems so troubled about breaking her promise, but it's like, by you fulfilling your promise, you're forcing two other people, a married couple, to break their promise. So like in the whole world of like promise breaking here, it seems like you getting one is breaking two. It's like the numbers aren't really playing out. So like also follow your heart. Like, I don't know, I was kind of annoyed with her.
Well, I mean, it's not. I don't think you can really be annoyed with her because she's been, you know, manipulated so hard by Cordelia. You know what I mean?
I know,
Like,
but she even herself is like, I can't break my promise. Like, it's not even a Cordelia thing. She says like, my father wouldn't want me to, you know. Though at the end she
For
does
sure.
acknowledge.
But I mean,
But I
like,
was just like,
you
no,
have
he
to.
wouldn't.
That totally makes sense, but like, I would say you have to at least factor in the fact that Cordelia has been guilt tripping her this entire time. You know,
Totally.
Uh,
Who I hated with
yeah,
a
Cordelia
deep
is
and burning
the worst,
passion.
the absolute worst. And Cordelia, I don't know if you noticed it. It's like a one-line thing, but she like killed herself after Susan was burned.
Yeah.
Right. Or she had.
Yeah.
Wait, did she? Or she had like a stroke? Actually, I think that's what it was.
she did.
Yeah.
She had like a brain stroke or something.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Um,
She didn't do that, but
But
yeah.
I think it was kind of she was so laden with guilt and the heaviness of her own actions, which she was a selfish old raisin that entire book. And she
Old
just kept
raisin.
getting she's terrible. She kept
Yeah.
getting worse and worse. And she was so spiteful. And she would say these like terribly manipulative things. It's like, you are the leech here. You have provided nothing. You're just leeching off of what Susan's father created, and you're ruining everything. And you're doing it in his name as if you're honoring his memory. And it's like you're doing the opposite of that. And I hated her.
Well, I mean, in that same vein, like you know, Cordelia and Eldred Jonas, they both have a similarity. And I've noticed that it's like a whole thing in this entire book, and it's this condemnation of youth, right? They hate it. They hate how and they're constantly referencing how young and pretty they are. Oh, Miss Young and Pretty, and like, oh, these boys that can't even grow beards yet. And you know, they hate the idea that these young
Their
people,
own folly.
right? Yeah, they hate the idea that these young people can come in and do a better job at whatever it is they're trying to do. Be more attractive, be more full of energy, be more full of life, and maybe even be correct about some of this stuff. Like, you know, Eldred Jonas hates the fact that he is this washed up old gunslinger and totally resents all gunslingers, and it makes him hate this quartet even more when he finds out that
he's a fail out of the gunslinger program.
He is. He's burnt out, and Cordelia is losing her youth, you know, and she's cozying up to Jonas, you know, which is kind of gross, and Jonas is banging
God,
Thorin's
terrible.
sister and stuff.
His balls were throbbing and felt full of liquid lead.
Right, yeah.
God, what a sentence. Then we got old Voyeur over here with the Palantir porn. Like, God, man.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. But yeah, like this whole resentment of youth is what I would say is like one of the bigger themes in this book is, you know, older generations will kind of like hold people's youth against them, you know, even
Mm-hmm.
if they're right about what they're saying. It's like no matter what, it's a bad quality that is to be reprimanded and held against somebody and hated and resented. It's like it's not Roland or Susan's fault that
No.
that they're teenagers, you know.
Right. Or that Roland is like so good at doing what he does, you know?
Yeah, speaking of Roland being so good at what he does, I want to kind of like gloss over a little bit the part where they're in their first fight as real gunslingers. That is one of the most epic parts. It's one of my favorite parts in the entire series when
Where
Roland
they're riding
shouts,
up behind him.
"Ah!" He says, "To me, gunslingers, ride them down, no prisoners."
Yeah.
Ah,
Heil to me, gunslingers, ride them
oh,
down. That's the thing that Hughes, the failed out gunslinger behind, he's like he didn't know what was happening until he heard that old battle
yeah,
cry of the
no
gunslinger.
prisoners. And
My
then he's
favorite
faster
line.
than sorry, he's fast like Eldred is just like he's faster than anyone I've ever seen. And
Yes.
they never miss anybody either. Like King wrote in that like not all of their shots were kills, but they hit every single time while on horseback, which I don't know if you ever tried to shoot or do anything on top of a horse. I
Like
have.
staying
It's
on top of the
impossible.
horse.
Yeah, it's impossible. Trying to do anything on a horse other than not falling off of it
And they're in
is really
full
difficult.
gallop.
Yeah, they're going really fast.
Oh
Oh,
man.
so
I mean,
cool.
and the fact that okay, so we have to have Mr. Silencer over here, Elaine with his freaking
Oh, it's
slingshot
Cuthbert.
takes out like
Yeah,
or a Cuthbert, yeah,
yeah.
four guys with the Cuthbert, and one guy looks back and his eye was replaced with a red ball. Just oh man, my favorite line of the whole book was right before that. And I think it's Elaine who says they're coming, and Roland looks at his friends and he says, "Mount up." Reaping has come. And I was like,
Uh,
yes.
so
Oh, I was
badass.
jacked.
There's a couple quotes I wanted to go over here real quick. So one of my favorite quotes in this book was, and now all these years later, it seemed to him that the most terrible fact of human existence was that broken hearts mended. You just want to feel sad forever, don't you? Well,
Yeah.
tough shit. You know, you're gonna get over it, and
Sorry,
it's not
time
gonna.
heals.
Yeah, time heals things, and sometimes you don't even want it to. You want to hold on to that memory forever. You want to hold on to that grief forever, and
Totally.
it's brutal. You
Kind of
know.
like how being mad sometimes feels good, you know, and you don't want to let it go because it gives you a certain power, you know. One of the lines that I really loved was more of an idea, really, but I think it was Eddie who says it after hearing the story told by Roland, and they're coming off and they're like, "Is everyone okay? Does anyone need to rest?" And they're like, "No, we're all good." And Eddie says, "The time is changed by a story, or the stories change the passage of time." And he says, "Well, at least it does in my world." And I think it's Roland who responds, and he's like, "I think that is true for all worlds." And so it is, you know? Like when you're in a good story, time is meaningless. Like it goes by so fast. We've all had those moments where you're like reading 1 minute, and then like 4 hours later, you like come out of it and you're like, whoa, it's nighttime or morning if you started at the nighttime, you know?
Yeah, stories have that ability. It's so
Yeah.
wild.
And
There's
I just
another.
love the idea that it like actually alters the passage of time.
Here's another one. This is the last quote that I'm gonna go over. Susan, when they get to the Emerald City, says, "I was raised to be polite, but not to suffer bullshit," which is it's one of my favorite lines spoken by Susanna. It's a perfect encapsulation of her entire personality. I was raised to be
Mhm.
polite, but not to suffer bullshit. I love and the way that I was listening to it too, and like the way that Frank Muller said it. It was just
Did you
like
say
this.
that to about Blaine?
No, she was saying it to the TikTok man or whatever towards like the end of the
Oh,
book,
that's right. That's
and
right.
then the way that Frank Muller said it, she was just like, "I was raised to be like really, really nice, and then but not to suffer bullshit," you know. And it's
I was
just
raised to be
ah,
polite.
yeah, and that Southern accent, yeah, it's so
Yeah,
great. Then
he does.
Susanna's a big part of Wolves of the Kala, so
Good.
lots of Susanna.
I love her a lot, and he does her voice so well because like I really dislike it where they try super late. Like it's like, dude, if you're not a woman, don't try to talk like he just kind of lightens his voice a little bit and
Yeah.
talks a little bit like this with it. It's just very good, you know. I feel like we didn't fully cover that fight.
Oh yeah,
So
sure.
let's
We
go
could totally
back
go
to it a
back to
little
that.
bit.
Yeah.
I loved the scene of them converging on them through the high grass, right? It was very Jurassic Park esque. you see like the line of men going single file through the tall grass, and then it zooms, the camera gives you the shot from above, and you see like converging from all sides the lines of the raptors like coming in on them
Oh,
as they
that's
start
from
to
The Lost World.
disappear.
Not to be that guy, but
Oh, I
that's
just
not.
meant Jurassic Park, like in referencing the
Oh,
whole
okay.
thing. But
Well,
yeah,
then I'm
specifically,
the asshole
yes.
there.
No, no, no,
Sorry.
no. You were
Like,
correct.
Chad, that's from The Lost World.
I
It's the
I
second
forgot that
Jurassic
one of
Park
them
movie.
is
Sorry.
called Jurassic Park specifically.
Yeah.
You're right. You're
I'm
right.
so
So from
sorry.
the Lost World. No, don't
Yeah.
apologize for being fucking right.
They're it's funny because even as the reader, we think they are babies, right? Like they're not, and they're arguing with each other. The quartet is kind of dissipating. They're all really worried and scared, and Roland and Cuthbert and Alen, like apart from that one little bit that we saw in the Traveler's Rest where they're able to kind of like get the jump on the Coven Hunters and stuff, we don't really see a whole lot of them being even proactive, really. I mean, they're kind of just counting stuff, and they've got an idea that something's up or whatever, but then like
They're even
Roland,
trying to not. They're just spending time.
yeah, exactly. But then they kind of get to this point where they figure out that they need to do something about this. And even then, it's like, are they going to be able to handle this though?
Right.
Like, I mean, these are like teenagers. So you have like
you
this
should have
feeling,
sent that bird 400 pages ago, like Cuthbert was yelling at you to do.
right? And even the Coven Hunters, seeing a lot of this stuff from their perspective and how angry they are and how like there's so much vitriol and these are hardened killers. And
Right.
I mean, the first time I read it, I thought either Cuthbert or Alen was gonna get murdered, like
Same.
really quickly into it.
I thought Susan and Roland was going to make it out, and Shimi, but not Elaine and Cuthbert.
Yeah, but no, they did it flawlessly, which is it's
Perfect
way cooler.
victory.
It's way cooler because it's very close to an eye roll, kind of like, all right, whatever. But you know what? They are trained gunslingers from Gilead. They were trained by Court. Like they're
Right.
they're also,
and their plan
really,
wasn't perfectly executed. Like
No,
they
but
got
it
the
was,
jump coming right out the gate,
yeah,
So
but they
it's
also
like there
hit
was a bunch
every
of
shot.
yeah,
like-
that's true. That's true. He got him with an arm throw, 20 meters with 60
Yeah.
feet with a knife throw in the wind from horseback.
Yeah, that's silly. And there's even that little moment. Roland kind of looks around and he expects to see one of them wounded or off of his horse or whatever, but they're just like, sitting on their horses. There are all these dead guys
we all
everywhere.
good?
We're good. We did
We're all
it.
good.
All right. Nice.
I could hear that battle.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
like as people
Oh,
were
yeah.
falling off, knees snapping from legs being caught on the holster,
Ugh.
the holster of the horse, the saddle. Like,
I know it said like the wind died
brutal.
down just enough so that he could hear the crack of his bone or something. Like, jeez.
I love their like not. They're like, okay, we have all these fireworks set up so you can shoot the tanker full of oil, then you'll light the firework that'll go into them. We got one for each, and it's like, nope, one bullet, it sparks, blows it up, makes a chain reaction. Like they just have no idea the forces that they're messing with.
So what did you think about John Farson, the good man, leading this kind of quasi rebellion kind of thing? We don't see him at all. We see the Man in Black come in and talk to, I think, Eldred Jonas as like a representative. What do you think that's all about?
Okay, I'm glad that you mentioned that because I don't really know. I kept thinking like, oh, they've discovered a coup to take over Gilead, and at one point they're like, well, someone's talking to somebody else, and they're just like, well, if all goes well, you'll be like a
baron.
A baron, that's what it is. You'll be a baron. You won't even have to worry about any of this. And it's like, what? So like obviously they're collecting armament and weaponry to lead some sort of overthrowing of the Gilead government, but that's as far as I got.
So it's kind of hinted at towards the end of this book, but John Farson, the good man, seems to be an agent of the Crimson King,
who
we haven't run into at all.
Okay.
But there's like that eye of the Crimson King. All of this has to do with the Dark Tower. Like that's basically what it all comes down to. That's why, I mean, like the Dark Tower is always waiting in the wings. It's always about the Dark Tower. It's always about Ka. It's always about the beams. As far distant as it seems, we're getting away from the real pillar, no pun intended, of this story. Like we're not actually ever that far away, right? Like it seems like it sometimes,
No.
but John Farson, the Crimson King, even the Coffin Hunters and everything like that, that's all connected to the degradation of this tower. Like it's very important to just like at least like keep that in mind.
Okay. Because it mentions at one point, like, and unbeknownst to everyone here, Gilead will be no more in 2 years' time or something like that. And as much as I don't know about all of that, I do really love how King constantly reminds us that all the worlds are connected. And that's kind of like the thing that he's always like, hey, remember, everything's connected. There's something bigger going on. Everyone's singing Hey Jude. It's like you're not in a separate land. These worlds are kind of the oil refineries with people's with like technology that they don't really know. And there's always like words written on them like Exxon or something, like oil companies from our time, and it's like they have guns, or that one has a machine gun that they're like, we don't really know where this came from, but like it's some old weapon or something. So it's like a really cool like mixing and layering and like reminder that like everything is connected.
Yeah.
And
Even
that's
though it doesn't
important.
seem like it sometimes, because it really
Right.
doesn't sometimes. There's parts of this whole series where you're like, why are we here doing this?
Yeah.
But you have to push through a little bit and really just trust the process and trust that, God, I can't wait for us to read book 7. Oh my God, it's so fucking crazy, dude.
Is it really?
Like, I mean, because up until now, things have been fairly straightforward, right? There's a lot
Yeah.
of weird terminology and stuff, but nothing that weird has really happened, you
Right.
know?
Like there's been some weirdness, like we had, we hooked up with an incubus and like, there's some
Yeah.
weird things going on, but like
Yeah, it's not like
it's just
nothing you've
wild.
never seen. Yeah, but we're about to
We're on the
it's it's
precipice.
about to get really weird. Wolves of the Kala is the one that Wolves of the Kala is the book I remember the least about.
That's the next one.
Yeah, I can't remember that much, but I know it's a really important book.
Is it a
But
thicken? Let me look at
it's
it.
like
One sec.
700 pages long.
Just gotta whip out my trusty box set. Thanks, Serene. Woohoo.
Yeah, it's fairly large.
Oh yeah, it's a thicken.
Yeah, it's not quite as long as Wizard and Glass, but it's 700 pages.
Wow, it
Uh,
features a bunch of people on horses holding lightsabers.
yeah. Things are about to get a little weird. And then Song of Susanna is one of my favorites. A lot of people don't seem to like that one very much, but I think it's a wild ride. And then Dark Tower 7, The Dark Tower is what the book is called.
Right.
Oof. It's a
Just
lot.
a whack job, huh?
It's a lot. I'm so excited about it.
Every one of these books so far has been so unique,
Yeah.
and it's its own little thing. Like they're all connected, of course. You need to read them in order, and they're all part of the same story. But each one has its own flavor, its own like soul. Like
Yeah.
they work together to make up like a whole body part. But the arm is not the leg. It's like they're all different, but they're working in unison together to create one full thing, and it's very well done.
Yeah, this is definitely on the second read of mine. This is inching into like top 5 of all time territory.
Yeah.
Like, this is really
My
good.
first read through.
Yeah.
What did it for me was the last book. I was like, all right, I'm in it now.
Yeah, it's funny because the first time I read Wizard and Glass, I think I was just so enamored with the Wastelands, and I didn't know what the rest of the series had to offer. So I was just kind of like, wow, we're really just doing 600 pages of whatever this is. Or like I was so glued into like what was going on before, but now it's like looking back at the entire series,
I needed this.
story fits so well into everything. It's such an integral part of this entire story. And
I needed to know what is Roland's motivation.
Totally.
And obviously it's going to be added onto, but obviously it's that first Palantir fly through, that shows him the tower and its degrading state and kind of implants this seed of necessity in him that like
and he's ready to bail on Susan right then.
right. And
Like,
I mentioned at the very beginning of this that there was a moment that helped me understand his character, and it was that. And it was okay. I kind of hated on him for sacrificing Jake at the beginning, but it was like now I obviously that was still not cool, but he sacrificed the woman of his dreams who was pregnant with his child.
Yeah,
so
he was
like
gonna go.
This man has already sacrificed a lot more than the boy that he met in the desert, a couple days prior. So it's like not that that's a good thing. It was not cool, dude. But I get it now. And it was like understandable. It's like he can't stop now, or else it would be make all those sacrifices that he's made, those much larger sacrifices, meaningless, So it's like I was like, okay, I get you now, man. I get you. And it helped me understand him a lot better. Kind of forgive him a little bit.
Well, and not to mention, I mean, the quartet is stronger now for having all that information. Like, so not only are you as the reader more in touch and in tune with Roland as a human and as a character, but he needs his quartet on his side. He's not going to be able to do this without Jake and Susanna and Eddie and Oy. And, I mean, I feel personally like it's part of his growth as a character and as a person is he was ready to just do this alone. But he needs these people around him, and not only does he need them, but he needs them to understand like why he is the way he is, why the tower is so important. So it's just as important that the quartet is on the same page as Roland as it is for us to be on the same page.
He almost kind of needs their like forgiveness of some of his past actions,
and they give it to him,
and they do. Yeah,
it's more like reassurance, I would say. It's not necessarily. They're not in a position to forgive him because those things weren't done to them.
Sure.
But they're more like, hey, if we're going to do this, you can't be just in tears the whole time. Like, you can't just, and he's not or anything, but it's like, he this is a very vulnerable position for him to put himself into to show them those things. And it was, he knew that he needed to show it to them. He didn't want to. Right. He definitely didn't want to, but there was a missing piece of that puzzle that needed to be put in.
I've mentioned this in previous podcasts, but one thing I'll go back to that I really, really like is so many times in books like this where there's a group and a party, one of the things that must be overcome, and it still may happen, but is the distrust between them. There's a falling out. There's a Boromir. There's some sort of chink in their armor. And time again, these characters come up with very good things that they could very easily and like would want to hide from each other, like Roland going crazy. But then they're just everyone's honest with each other and they tell them right up. Like an example in this book was Eddie had a dream that was really troubling to him about Roland like driving a tractor and like crushing everyone or something, like at the very beginning of the book. And he wakes up and Roland's like, "Where are you troubled?" And he was like, "Yeah. And I had this terrible dream about you driving a tractor and killing us all." And it was like, like I feel immediately. And it was just like, yes, cool. I like not having to deal with their quartet being broken up, but I like how they're just maintained solidity. That's a really cool thing.
Yeah, it's interesting because Susanna's probably pregnant.
Yeah,
she hasn't told Eddie.
She's definitely pregnant.
She hasn't told Eddie though, which is
that is the one big dishonest thing that she hasn't. I didn't even think
I wouldn't
about
call
that.
it dishonest necessarily because Eddie hasn't asked her.
Well, but I mean,
I know that's kind of semantic, but I'm just saying, like, it's not really coming from a place of like she wants to keep it from Eddie because or whatever. I think she doesn't really know what's going on,
right?
So she doesn't want to stress him out. She's
like, we all don't need this.
Yeah, exactly.
At the very beginning, when Roland kind of stands up and chews out Blame the Train, and then Eddie speaks up in the back and he goes, "They don't call him the Mad Dog of Gilead for nothing." They actually call him the Mad Dog of Gilead?
I don't think
was
they
Eddie
did.
just like throwing that in there?
I think he was just throwing that in.
Okay, because I feel like it was kind of a bold thing. Like, what if Blame the Train has like memory banks or something about like all the nicknames known of every gunslinger? And he's like, "No, they didn't." I don't know. I was just like, what the hell are you doing, Eddie? Like, he doesn't need your help, man.
Eddie and Cuthbert are the same guy.
I don't know. He was being ridiculous. Okay, so Susan's horse is named Pylon.
Yeah.
Is there any depth to that? Like, obviously, pylon is like a R-time word, meaning like an energy structure or something. I don't know. I felt like there was some sort of depth in there that I'm just not getting.
Nah, probably not.
Okay.
Maybe there is. I don't know. Maybe some like hardcore Dark Tower aficionado is just like, I hate this podcast. So
it's like, I know this one. I know this one. I know this one.
Well, send us an email.
Me. Seriously, I'm curious. Okay. Cordelia, at one point, her terrible aunt stuffs up one of the stuffies, puts it in Susan's clothes on it, and then lights it on fire. Was she just doing that to like voodoo doll hate, or like what was that?
I think that woman is just like literally losing her mind.
Okay.
She's just crazy.
Yeah, she gets in like a fight with Susan, and her next act is to take a scarecrow, put Susan's clothes in it, and then light it on fire.
Yeah, I mean, there's just like a weird like power imbalance between the two of them. I mean, Cordelia, it's like she's her parental figure, obviously, but like Susan has never really seen her like quite like that, or at least she's not seeing her like that anymore, you
Right.
know. And I think that Cordelia is realizing that as well and is struggling with that, you know, because all Cordelia cares about is getting money. She doesn't give a shit about
Right.
Susan. She doesn't care about Susan at
She's the
all.
most selfish.
And Susan confronts her on that too, you know. I love that part where Susan, I can't remember the exact quote, but Cordelia and Susan are arguing, and Susan says, "If I'm old enough to be married off for money to this old man, then you need to talk to me with some respect."
Right.
Like, hell, that's like we said before, like that's a gunslinger move
Yep.
right there, you know.
That
Like
was the same thing as Roland saying to Blaine, like, I could call you a sucker, but you have no mouth. I could say F your mother, but you don't have one.
yeah, no,
When
they're
Blaine's like, you can't get rude or whatever.
and that's one of those things like, you know, to kind of bring it back to what you said about like the kind of like insta love thing. It's like I feel like as quickly as they did get together, they do make quite a bit of sense, you know.
Oh,
So
for
at least
sure.
there's that. So
Oh, and I never said that as like a bad thing. It's just a funny thing to me. You know, he does a very good job of making it seem proper, but it's just like there is no warm up.
nah, not really.
Nah.
They're,
And there doesn't need to be one.
but I mean, like, look at Susan's situation when she sees Roland for the first time. Like, people from Gilead are like this distant. She's never seen anybody from that barony. They're like,
Right.
they're not legendary, but you know what I
Oh,
mean?
he's a
Like,
knight in shining
yeah,
armor.
he is literally a knight. Yeah. And
Yeah.
she's never seen somebody like that. The way that he treats her is a lot different than she's probably been treated by anybody else.
I mean, she's about to be shucked off to sold to some old man
Right.
as like
Yeah.
a sex slave.
And then she sees this tall drink of water with bombardier's eyes, you
And a
know,
little
like
umbrella fruit floating in it.
yeah, and, you know, and
He just
he's
sweeps her off her feet.
right immediately. And then
I mean, I was like swooning too. I was like, damn, Roland.
damn, Roland, I didn't know you had it in you.
Yeah,
All right.
seriously. I was like, what a slick man. He was fearless too. Came up right up to her. Oh man, he was a smooth operator.
Yeah, he bowed.
Yeah, he bowed to her, forced her to ride the horse.
All right, so we're gonna start wrapping this up here. This has been a nice long episode, but
It
it
has
needed
been
to
nice,
be
chunky one.
because it needed to be long because we were gonna do this in 2 parts, but you know, we just do one book per episode. Apparently, it doesn't matter how
Hey,
long it is.
You know, it's fine.
We
Dude,
can do it.
one second before we do wrap up here. Blaine was going so fast. I just want to throw this out there. He was going so fast, he killed a deer by driving by it. Like he like cavitation bubbled that deer to death. That
Yeah,
was
it
some
was like
straight
900 miles an hour or something like that.
that was like mantis shrimpage, you know? Mantis shrimp. I think it's awesome.
All right, so I have one last question, and then we're gonna
Okay.
start wrapping up. What do you think is gonna happen in Wolves of the Kala?
These book series at the end of, I mean, we always ask, and I always feel like I've got like some pretty solid thoughts as to what's going to happen in series. And sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong, and I always remember my successes. So, but I'm sure I'm wrong often. There's so many people listening, like, yes, you are.
Yeah.
But man, this series, it is so wackadoo. I have no idea. So they're
They're going to Thunderclap. That's the next
going
place.
to Thunderclap. Okay.
So,
Also,
like,
the
what kind of
TikTok
name for a
man.
town is that? Oh yeah, we didn't even get into that. Oh my god.
Yeah, I know. Okay, the
jeez.
whole Wizard of Oz thing, like that was kind of weird. What that was an odd like reference throwdown. Like I was really confused by the whole Wizard of Oz thing.
Okay, so I have a theory about this, and I doubt it's right, but I think that Randall Flagg is trying to dissuade them from seeking the tower, right? That's what he's trying to do.
Sure.
And I think that one of the ways that he's trying to do it is by using this. He knows that Eddie and Jake and Susanna are from our world, from New York. He also knows that they understand the idea behind the Wizard of Oz. The whole point of the Wizard of Oz is like there's no place like home, right? There's no like we're trying to get back home. And so he's trying to capitalize on that and trying to break down
like
the
a
content.
nostalgia play.
So I think that what happened was that Randall Flagg just totally materialized the entire Emerald City thing and the Wizard of Oz, and he was trying to get them to forsake the tower, forsake Roland, and separate them from Roland, so that he could then make it so that Roland had an extremely difficult time getting to that tower. So that's what I
Oh,
think all of that is.
okay.
That's what I think the significance of the Wizard of Oz is. That's
I
why he
think you're
gave them
right.
all ruby slippers and things like that.
Because
It's
if you could get him, sorry, keep going.
that's basically it. I mean, that's I could be wrong about that. I don't think I am though. I mean, the Wizard of Oz is like a very specific thing. Yeah, I love when they're trying to explain the Wizard of Oz too.
I know.
And when Suzanne is like, "Oh, it was the monkeys that always scared me," it's like, dude, me too. I hated the monkeys in the Wizard of Oz. I hate the
Straight up,
Wizard of Oz. I think that movie sucks. Anyway,
it does
like,
suck. Yeah, I played a play once, and I was one of the monkeys. I was a lot of
of
characters,
course
but
you
I
were.
played one of the monkeys. Um,
Go ahead.
okay, that puts it that is the answer I was looking for because of the what's the whole point of that movie? To get home, the
Yeah,
like to
and the
remind you about
friends you
how
make along
important.
the way, but
True that too,
but
but like yeah, I think you're right. The TikTok or the Man in Black, whoever was to court what flag was like. Okay, if I can put them in this, because like, what's the goal of that movie? To get home. If I can like put them in that mindset, maybe they'll be like, that's the goal of what we're doing is to get home and like derail them somehow.
mhm.
Um, okay, that makes sense to me. I thought the TikTok man's death was a little anticlimactic. They're like, hey,
Yeah.
look, the TikTok man. Oh no, that big baddie from the past.
And then they just kill him, and it's like, what's the point of even having him like kind of like take him along for his ride at the end of
Yeah,
the last book?
like it kind
Yeah,
of made his death like not as cool. Like
I
he
mean,
could have been plucked right out of there, and it would have made been fine.
look, King is one of my very favorite authors, but I don't think he even knows what he's doing sometimes.
He
And
admits as
sometimes,
much in the
yeah, I mean,
afterwards.
like some stuff really does just kind of end with a whimper with some of his books. And I think the TikTok
And
Man is
with a
just one of
whimper,
those
well
things.
said.
Yeah, so the TikTok Man is just kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, I mean, I guess this cosmic wizard just needed this dude to play the Wizard of Oz, even though
Yeah,
they're gonna
because he
kill
would
him
look
like
stupid.
immediately. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
kind of dumb. Like, why didn't Randall Flagg? That would have actually been a lot more impactful if Randall Flagg was the Wizard of Oz, and then
totally.
was like actually saying like, "Oh no, but I'll be able to take you back." But I mean,
Yeah, but I mean, he was
King,
looking away, so he kind of looked foolish. So it made him look, downgraded him in our eyes, or at least his power.
yeah,
He
that
was
part's
facing
really
away from
cool, but
them.
really weird too.
It was really weird.
I feel like I'm gonna say that like a few more times, like as we're reading these books. Like, yeah, that part was really cool, but it was really weird.
It's really weird. I mean, we've said that multiple times about
Yeah,
like, yeah,
it's
it's
just
so
a
many
weird
things.
series.
Really weird.
This is probably the weirdest series we're gonna read in at least like the next year, probably.
Yeah, so they're headed off to Thunder. What is it? Thunder something?
Thunderclap.
Thunderclap. I have no idea. They're headed toward End World, right? That's
Yeah,
their end game here.
that's the
Yeah.
end game. The tower.
And do they have to like cross into a new world in order to get to Thunderclap or
I don't think so. I think it's down the old path of the beam because
okay.
they're back on the
So
path of the beam.
right. And they get out of there. They had to like put on their shoes, which is like a weird thing that I don't get at all. And then
But
they
the
like
ruby slippers.
yeah. Then they had
Well,
to
I
all
think that
click
was just
together and it opened
yeah.
up. Yeah, I guess it
That's
was
all. That all
court like
feeds
putting
into
him
the
in the
whole thing.
mindset.
Yeah,
Okay,
totally.
okay. But still like making him click, I thought that was kind of lame.
It's weird, man.
Like, oh, it
Like
was
it's
because Oi didn't click. Like, oh my gosh, the goat thing has to click his heels. Like, all
it's like
right.
a dog. That's how
Ah,
I
it looks
picture.
like a goat in my mind.
I picture Oi as like a half dog, half like possum kind of
Oh,
thing,
probably because
or
Billy
like
Bumbley sounds like a
raccoon.
Billy goat. He has like little curled horns in my like, "Oi, oi," like he looks like a mountain goat
Oh,
in my
really
head.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
I don't
sure.
picture him like that at all.
Oh,
But
really?
I've
Yeah.
like seen pictures of Oi and stuff though, because
Oh, okay.
I like went down the
Wow,
hole, but
artistic renditions. Have you
they're
seen one
pictures.
drawn by
They're
Stephen
real.
King himself?
No,
I think he looks
I
like a goat.
haven't.
A cute little goat. Dude, have you seen a miniature goat? They're like the cutest animals
They're
in
adorable.
the world. I would totally own one. Apparently, they make really good house pets too. If you guys are having a bad day, just like Google mini goat, and there's little like pictures of people coming home and them just like clunk, 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 like jumping their way to it. It is the most adorable thing that you will see this week. I guarantee it.
Well, now that we've talked about miniature goats, I think that's a good place to wrap up this episode. What do you think?
I think so. I
Yeah.
think mini goats is a good place to end it. And I think there's a new one that we can end with this one. And let's see if you can remember the response to it, which is may your luck rise.
I don't remember.
The response is may your luck and may yours rise twice.
Oh, Well,
Because he says that right at the end of the fight, or right before the fight. He's like, "May your luck rise," and he's like, "May yours rise twice."
well, damn. I feel like not a very good Dark Tower fan. So I'll just
It's only
leave
said
you with
once.
I'll just leave you with long days and pleasant nights.
And may you all, and you, Evan, have twice the number.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening to this episode and for reading along with us on this journey toward the Dark Tower that I'm taking for the second time and Chad's taking for the first time. Oh boy. All right, so now
Love it all the time.
It's like we just finished Goblet of Fire and now things are about to get real.
Yeah, straight up.
It's kind of the same.
I'm so excited. I'm going to read more tonight.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we are clear to do that. Everybody, hope you all have an awesome rest of your day. And of course, happy reading.
Bye, everybody.